When it comes to being knowledgeable about Christian ethics, sometimes I think what we want is a list of issues with a list of Christian answers and Christian proof of texts for those things. And I'm not saying that that can't be helpful, but I don't think long term that's what's going to help us to sustain a Christian ethic. I think about, for instance, in the early 1970s, evangelicals were not prepared for an abortion culture that came after Roe versus Wade, not because evangelicals were committed to abortion, but because they didn't have a framework biblically to think about issues of abortion, about the sanctity of unborn human life. That came later, but it took a little while to get there. So I think shaping and forming intuitions that are rooted in the Bible, where you're so immersed in the storyline of Scripture that you start to recognize where there are problem areas. I think that's one important facet of it. Another is having an understanding of history. When Ecclesiastes tells us there's nothing new under the sun, that's obvious to us right now. There's really no challenge that we have not seen before. And so seeing the way these things have developed in the past helps us to recognize, oh, this is the same sort of argument that was being made in another generation and in another time. And here's how Christians handled that. I think that's important. And then the third thing is to really be involved in the lives of people, and especially wounded and hurting people. One of the ways that when I was serving a local church that I was able to know, how am I not being understood and not being heard when I'm preaching? And what are the things I'm not preaching and teaching about because they don't occur to me? I haven't experienced those things. Was in one-on-one counseling with people who were wounded and hurting. I was starting to see particular trends and realizing that I need to emphasize when I say that the gospel is for sinners, I mean not just sinners that you may think of as kind of within the realm of respectable sinners forgiven, but for those of you who've done this, and for those of you who've done that, for those of you who've done this, and also to look at myself and the way that I try to avoid obedience to Christ. That whenever I'm reading the Bible, I ask myself, what in me is not wanting to believe this and not wanting to follow this? And that has to be happening. If I don't recognize that, then what I'm saying is I'm not a sinner in need of direction and in need of the voice of Christ. I am. And so when I recognize, how am I trying to avoid the claims that Jesus is making on me, that can help me to become more sensitive to, as I'm addressing tough ethical issues, to be able to cover the whole spectrum of those things.